but you can think about our five senses. Now, neurologically, they actually integrate with our solar plexus. Our five senses interrelate with our solar plexus. And I've been pointed out that our solar plexus relates to our subconscious mind. That if we can actually get our senses to be coordinated in terms of looking at our sixth sense, and you can say, we all know, we've heard about the sixth sense, and our sixth sense relates to our intuition. And our intuition is based on, you can say, our external sensory perception. Sometimes, though, that perception can be tainted with judgment. Now, just doing a little that mindfulness exercise, it kind of brought you if you experienced it, it brought you present, and actually judgment was non-present. If you notice that in your own consciousness, maybe not, but without judgment, as Mark was talking about, you can say our conscious mind opens up to our seventh sense, and our seventh sense relates to illumination. Illumination that helps to put in perspective what we're sensing from the external world. And when that happens, when we're actually tuned in that way, and our heart, you can say our conscious mind is kept in patterns of coherence, and patterns of coherence as heart math, the work that I do with heart math, recognize when you hold attitudes of thankfulness, appreciation, patience, it puts you can say this is a representation of a coherent HRV, heart rate variability rhythm. And when our heart's positioned in that way physiologically, because our conscious mind is holding such attitudes there, then it allows for the seventh sense to open up. And then when that opens up, it allows for inspiration that causes awakening to something more. Now, part of Anne's book she put together for her father, and the first principle is inspiration. And the fact is, inspiration is constantly being given to us, you'd say, from the essence, from above, from the essence of light that we actually are in essence. You can say each of us, really, maybe that rings true with you. I know it does with me. In essence, we're all an essence of light there. And that's a constant. You can say that essence is always shining. It's always offering something. It's just a matter of being received in our hearts. And when it's received, we feel a sense of inspiration that causes an awakening that relates to illumination there. So in terms of illumination of, you can say, what's happening now? Again, this portal of late spring. And it doesn't mean that we're not going to realize what we need to do, say, in the fall, but this certain period of time is a certain keen time to recognize unforeseen paths, tonalities, openings there. And you can say it comes down. It comes down into our heart. Inside, you can say our gut, you get our sixth sense, we have a gut feeling, and then out into the world. Now, a little caveat here is when we're actually tuned to our seventh sense, we act out of poise. We act out of poise. But then if we're only acting out of our sixth sense, we act out of haste. And in your own life, I'm sure when you've acted out of haste, what kind of uh, what kind of problems that may cause there. So this is a way, this is how we work. This is the design of our being, basically. I'm looking to see how we can open up our consciousness to something more. So we begin to act more out of poise than out of haste. And then catching yourself when we are acting out of haste, to catching yourself to retune, to recenter, to allow an alignment to occur. Let's look at that. What does it take for an alignment to occur? So opening the seventh sense brings internal guidance felt illuminatively. Now, just in preparing these slides or preparing this theme for this evening, I had the sensing that of just gearing my heart to what I feel like illuminatively. And that kind of just sparks something in me to along these lines. So it brings internal guidance felt illuminatively. Now, in that respect, if it's true guidance, it illuminates. Now, here's a kicker too, that illumination has its rhythm. Sometimes we might feel illuminated, sometimes we may not. The sun's always shining, but sometimes there's periods when you could say day and night there, but that also might happen during the day. Illumination has its rhythms. So It's not a matter of being high all the time, but it's a matter of being in tune with the rhythms of illumination. There. It gives us navigation with poise. And I know Polly's taken note of this. I have a certain tagline. It gives us pace with grace. Yes, 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 Polly. Okay. And it awakens us to something more in life. So that's something more in life. You can say, looking at this, opening to the seventh sense. Now, this is a Bible quote, and if you're not biblically inclined, I think you can still cotton on to what these words reference. So, another way, opening the seventh sense. Whatsoever things are true, honest, just, pure, lovely, of good report. For that, just a little if there be any virtue, if there be any about it, maybe explore for yourself. Think and the practice and appreciate called unified mindfulness. It's a wonderful practice. Philippians conscious practice. Whether it's in the Bible or not, just to consider. Like when you look at seeing the world, just looking at a flower. This is we have a rose of Sharon tree in our backyard, and I love this tree, this bush with the rose and Sharon. I just love it each year. And it just started blooming in June. So this is a picture of one of the blooms there. But to think about, think of what's lovely there, to think on those things. And then when we do that, you can say judgment is non-existence. It brings us presence. It brings us to something more. Now, looking at the book that Robert did my illustrations for, my personal seventh sense accent, just a little story about myself. Yeah, I went through a period of 10 years with inflammatory bowel disease, eventually leading to colon cancer. But what got me through was actually actually distilling, I call them the healing verses in the Psalms. And there was one particular verse in the book that I've cottoned on to during that 10-year period, and it was this one. Unto the upright there ariseth light in the darkness, from Psalm 112. So from that period, I learned this posture exercise from Igasku, where you stand against the wall for 4 minutes, and basically, the cancer, the inflammatory bowel disease was a challenge, but what was more of a challenge was associated hip pain, where I couldn't work for a year and a half because I had severe, severe hip pain associated with the autoimmune condition. But I learned this exercise of just having a posture exercise, standing 4 minutes against the wall, and I kind of dovetailed in terms of this making this verse actually actualized in my experience onto the upright. And I just sensed I just needed to keep my integrity during that period. And sure enough, I moved along and I got to a point where I was well enough and I realized to myself, if I have an idea that's creative, I'm not going to sit on myself. I'm going to act on that. So since that point, I've acted on my creative ideas since then. That's part of this process tonight is this creative idea I felt impelled with. Okay, so that's my experience here. But thinking about opening your seventh sense through soft fascination. I don't know if you've heard of the term soft fascination. Soft fascination relates to, you can say, being in nature where you experience appreciation that broadens and softens your consciousness. It's like you're just in a presence, and nature actually helps to do that, where your nervous system kind of down regulates and it opens up, and you can say the crusty parts or the rigid parts we hold fast with our internal state there begins to relax. When that opens up there, then it begins to open up something more, the seventh sense. So again, opening up to what illuminates your heart and mind. Now I found things, and I'm sure you found things too, but now to actually use this practically in your experience, to let your seventh sense be opened. That might actually be a new concept, a new thought to you, your seventh sense, not just your sixth sense.